My name is Emily Hayes. At my sister's wedding, right in the middle of a lavish celebration where everyone raised their glasses in joy, my parents took the microphone, smiled at the crowd, and announced they were streamlining the family to preserve core values. No one said my name, no one looked at me. My sister simply bowed her head like I was the blemish they needed to hide. But what they didn't expect was that I had brought an envelope. And just a few days later, the entire Hayes family had to face a reckoning they could no longer deny. Have you ever been erased from someone's life by the people who were supposed to love you? Share your story in the comments. Hit like if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. And don't forget to subscribe to hear the rest of my story, a story about silence and defiance. For the longest time, I thought maybe I had done something wrong, that if I just tried a little harder, maybe I would be seen, maybe I would be loved like Grace was. But as I grew up, I realized the difference had been decided early on, like a choice I was never allowed to make. I remember being 12 at Christmas. My mom bought two matching dresses, one red, one blue, saying my sister and I would look lovely in the family photo. I picked the blue one. She frowned and said the color made me look dull and stiff. But Grace got all the compliments in her red dress, with soft curls and shiny patent shoes I had always wanted. That evening, when the family gathered for pictures, I stood between my parents, forcing a smile because my mom kept reminding me to smile just right. I didn't know what that meant. If I smiled too big, it was unrefined. Too little, and I was cold. The camera flashed twice. Everyone went inside for dinner. A month later, when the thank you cards arrived and I saw the printed photo, I froze. I wasn't in it. Grace stood in the middle, my father's arm draped around her, my mother standing on the other side. The Christmas tree behind them, everything as it was that night, except the spot where I had stood was now completely empty. It wasn't the angle, it wasn't cropped for symmetry, it was erased. Someone had done it on purpose, and that someone could only have been my mother. I asked her about it gently while helping her wash dishes. She looked up at me for 3 seconds, then turned away and kept drying a wine glass. A photo doesn't always have to be perfect, she said flatly. I still have the original, the misprinted one, with my head tilted too far left and my dress wrinkled at the waist. That one detail alone, she once told me, made me look unsightly. After that day, everything slowly became clearer. Grace was chosen for the school magazine cover. I was told not to speak too long at the awards ceremony. I loved literature, but when I won a statewide essay competition, Mom only smiled and said, "You write well, but your voice doesn't photograph well." Dad rarely spoke. He avoided tension, kept his eyes on his plate when Mom told me my outfit was tasteless at a family dinner. I tried to catch his eyes once, quietly, pleading. But all I got was a blank space. Grace took ballet. She had private tutors for the arts. I, who earned a full scholarship to study painting, was told to buy my own supplies if I was serious about that kind of thing. Every summer, we'd stay at the lake house my grandmother left behind. Grace got the big room with the window facing the water. I stayed in the attic. Low ceiling, hot in the afternoons. One time, I knocked over a picture frame by accident. My hand bled from the glass, but Mom didn't check. She just asked, "Do you even care about preserving anything?" I learned to stay quiet, to not talk too much when guests came over, to pull back when I didn't fit the frame. I thought I'd gotten used to it, but I hadn't. Every offhand comment, every passing glance left small bruises I didn't realize were bruises until years later. When Grace started high school, Mom began talking about the family image like it was a campaign slogan. The Hayes family represents refinement, modernity, and unity, she would say, over and over. Grace was the centerpiece in every photo, every story, every event. And me? I was the background. Or not in the picture at all. The older I got, the more I understood what it meant to be selectively silenced. No one yelled, no one hit me, but every intentional absence, every empty space, peeled off another layer of who I was in this family. And then came the wedding, when they no longer had to hide, when I had become too different to keep around, even as a backdrop, when silence became a public statement delivered with a smile in front of hundreds, making it crystal clear that I no longer belonged in the story they wanted to show the world. I didn't go home after the wedding. I walked along the lakefront, past trees draped in moss and water shimmering under the fading light. The dress, the music, the laughter, all of it faded behind me like a dream I had no place in. As night fell, I caught the last train back to my small apartment in Burlington, where I've lived alone for almost 6 years. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my kitchen, the dim yellow light casting a glow on my hand wrapped around a cold mug of tea. The cropped Christmas photo still sat in the drawer by the window, next to a few letters my grandmother had sent me during college. I pulled my laptop closer, opened it, not to work, not to scroll, but because something inside me pushed me to look again. I'd once handled the finances for the scholarship fund named after my grandfather before I left. Since my parents never revoked access, I still had a linked drive with internal documents. I'd never opened it since leaving. But tonight, I typed in the password like I was unlocking an old vault I'd sealed long ago. Dozens of folders appeared. Balance sheets, grant agreements, zipped files of meeting notes. I didn't know what I was searching for, but my fingers kept clicking, one layer after another, like a current pulling me toward something hidden. And then I saw it, a folder named Property Transfer Records 2019. I stopped. Inside were 4 PDFs. One of them was titled authorization _ transfer _ Lake Champlain _ final PFS. I opened it. There was my name, my full legal name, typed into the field labeled transferor. Beneath it was a signature. At first glance, it looked like mine. But the longer I stared, the more it felt wrong. The loop in the H was off. The end stroke dragged unnaturally long. I froze. Next to it was a notarization seal signed by Linda Hayes. Linda was my dad's cousin, a quiet woman who used to notarize documents part-time in Montpelier. I never imagined she'd be involved in something like this. But her name was there on the line that read, witnessed and certified transfer of property ownership. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I opened my drawer, pulled out an old lease with my actual signature, and placed the two side by side. Not even close. My heart clenched. This wasn't just a lie. This was premeditated. Someone had forged my name. Someone had created a fraudulent legal transfer, taking the lake house, the one place in my memory that still felt like family, and stripping it from me. That house had been left to me by my grandmother in a separate will, properly witnessed and notarized. After she died, my parents told me there was no need to deal with anything, that everything was being held safely in the family trust. I believed them. I thought they were safeguarding it. But now I understood. They weren't keeping it safe. They were keeping it for themselves. I remembered summers sanding the porch railings, early morning bike rides around the water, quiet nights reading next to my grandmother as the crickets chirped outside. Grace used to say she hated that house because the Wi-Fi was slow. But her 30th birthday party had been held there, with 50 guests and catered champagne. I wasn't invited. Now that place wasn't mine anymore. I pulled the curtain open. Outside, the city was hushed in midnight stillness. Streetlights flickered across the melting snow. I had no tears left. Only a kind of silence so heavy it pressed against my ribs, like my entire childhood had just been scraped away by a single forged line of ink. I closed the laptop, both hands resting on the lid, heavy. They didn't just erase me from the photos, they erased my legacy. They stripped away the one piece of memory I thought would remain untouched, and they didn't do it because they needed it. They did it because they believed I'd never have the courage to look back. never be angry enough to fight back. But that night, I knew I wasn't going to stay silent anymore, not to reclaim everything, but to stop being the one who got erased and said nothing, letting them believe I never saw what they did. I sat frozen in my chair for a long time, the ceiling light casting a pale wash across the room, like even the air was holding its breath with me. One name echoed in my mind, the only person in the family I'd never been afraid to call: Uncle Will. Will is my mother's older brother. He was never like the Hayes family. He didn't speak in circles, didn't polish his image, didn't live to impress anyone. When I was a kid and got punished for being too loud or messing up the family image, he was the only one who'd sneak me out to the backyard, pitch a tent with bed sheets, and let me read under the stars. He once told me, "If you ever feel unseen, write it down to remember that you existed." I dialed his number. It wasn't saved in my contacts, but my fingers remembered it like it had never been erased. The phone rang 3 times. Then his voice came through, raspy and warm, like those summer nights long ago. Will speaking. I tried to keep my voice steady. "It's me, Emily." There was a pause, like wind brushing across old guitar strings. "Emily," he said, barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" That question, from someone who genuinely wanted to know, tightened something in my throat. I inhaled. I don't really know, but I need to ask you something about the lake house." His voice shifted, deeper now. "You found it, didn't you?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see. "I found the transfer document. It has my name on it, but not my signature." He sighed, the sound tired, like he'd been waiting for this day. "I suspected as much. That year I asked your mother about the estate division. She said everything had been taken care of. But when I asked to see a copy of the will, she got angry. We haven't spoken since." I gripped the phone tighter. "Did you ever see the original?" "Yes," he said. "I have a scanned copy. Your grandmother sent it to me privately, said just in case the girl ever needs it. She always knew, Emily. She knew you were the only one who would protect what she believed had value." I couldn't speak. I could only hear the pounding of my own heart, as if every vein in my body had come alive at once. "I'll send it to you," he continued. "It has the signature, the notary seal, and even a little note from her. I'll email it to you tonight." I closed my eyes, not from relief, but because for the first time in years, someone confirmed I wasn't crazy. I wasn't making it up. I wasn't imagining things. That house had once been mine. That will had once said my name, and someone had deliberately tried to erase it. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You already know what to do, Emily. I don't need to tell you. Just know you're not alone. You've never been a shadow. They only wanted you to think you were." We didn't speak for a while after that. Silence stretched between us like a promise. It had been years since a phone call ended without disappointment. When I hung up, a new email was already sitting in my inbox. Sender, William Palmer. Attachment, Elise_Will_original P. I opened it. The first page bore my grandmother's soft, slanted handwriting. "For Emily, the true heir of the home we once dreamed about together." Below that was a red seal, full signature, notarized in March, a year before she passed. Not a draft, not a placeholder. The one and only copy she meant to leave behind. I placed my hand on the screen right where my name appeared, and for a moment, it felt like someone far away was calling me back from a place I thought I'd been lost in forever. Those words, that signature, they were proof I hadn't been forgotten by the one person in this family who loved me without needing me to perform. Anger, I didn't go to bed. Not because I was angry or heartbroken, but because something inside me had started moving, slow, quiet, but steady, like a wind current long buried that had finally found its way out. I poured another cup of coffee, hand still resting on the mouse. The will Uncle Will had sent sat open next to the screen, alongside all the scattered evidence I'd gathered over the years but never strung together. Before, it was all instinct, fragments, gut feelings, but now every detail was lighting up, pieces of a pattern that finally made sense. I reopened an old email archive from my external drive, deleted threads from the main server but still cached in backup memory. I found a chain between my mother and the Family Foundation's media coordinator. In it, she wrote, "I want Emily's image removed completely from campaign materials. Grace better reflects the spirit of the foundation. Do not use photos from the 2016 event. It clashes with the brand direction." So I remembered that year. I gave the donor appreciation speech on her behalf because she lost her voice. I wore a navy dress, spent 3 weeks preparing. Guests shook my hand, smiled, said kind things. No photo from that night survived. Now I understood why. I clicked into another folder. Zoom recordings from the finance meetings I used to attend remotely. Most were dull discussions on budgets and cash flow. But one clip I hadn't remembered saving. I hadn't listened to it since. My mother's voice, crisp and certain. "Grace represents the brand image we need. Emily doesn't fit. Too sharp, too different. And different isn't good for the family identity." Then my father, calmer but just as cold. "She used to read everything, but she doesn't have access anymore. Don't worry." I sat still. That recording didn't just stab, it twisted, deep in the place I'd once hoped they never truly thought that way. I opened a new document, titled it Evidence File Not Emily Hayes. Beneath it, I pasted the notarized will, screenshots of the forged signature from the property transfer, side-by-side comparisons with my real signature, internal email screenshots, and a transcript from the Zoom recording. I numbered each item, included dates, embedded links to the original files stored in a private drive. Every document was annotated, cross-referenced, sourced, like I was building a legal case, not out of vengeance, but to protect the one thing still intact, the truth. I reviewed each file, every link, again and again. The clock struck 4 a.m. My eyes were dry, my shoulders stiff, but I sat upright. My mind, for once, felt calibrated, not frenzied, not foggy. Every detail clicked, every proof held weight. I opened my email, typing the address of someone I hadn't contacted in years, Cameron Blair. Cameron used to be the Family Foundation's private attorney, but after a dispute over estate assets, he stepped away, opened his own practice in Hartford, and cut all ties. I used to think he was just like the rest, measured, detached, loyal to no one. But he was also the only one who once pulled me aside in a hallway and said, "If you ever feel erased, check the signature." I titled the email, "About the Lake House." The message was brief. "Mr. Cameron, I need your help reviewing some documents and getting legal advice." Attached is the file. "Thank you for saying what you did in 2017. Now I understand." I hit send. Right after that, I printed hard copies of all the documents and slipped them into the brown folder I had once used for my college thesis. I didn't know if Cameron would respond, but I knew that tonight I had done what needed to be done. Not to reclaim a house, but to prove that I was no longer silent, and I wouldn't let anyone rewrite my existence with forged signatures. That evening, the air was chilly, misty rain drifting like threads of silk catching on my coat. I parked outside the Riverside Hotel where the Hayes Foundation's annual gala was being held. Pale yellow marquee letters lit up the glass facade. An evening honoring generational values. From a distance, I saw my father step onto the red carpet, hand in hand with my mother, nodding at guests like he was the living emblem of integrity. I didn't wear anything flashy, a long-sleeved black dress with a simple neckline, hair pulled back, no lipstick, no jewelry. In my hand was a thick, dark red envelope, sealed shut, marked only with the foundation's name in small, gold lettering in the corner. I walked through the glass doors. No one stopped me, no one greeted me. I didn't need them to see me tonight. I only needed them to see what I was leaving behind. The registration table was set up just to the right of the grand foyer, Two young volunteers were busy checking names on the guest list. One glanced at me and asked, "Are you with the organizing committee or the media invite list?" I smiled, gently placing the envelope on the table. "This is for the organizers. The right person will know what to do with it." Without another word, I turned and slipped into the side hallway, leading toward the main ballroom. No one stopped me. Everything moved along too smoothly, as if my presence here had never been part of their records to begin with. The ballroom was spacious, decorated with oversized banners hanging from the ceiling, each one featuring Grace. Photos of her speaking, cutting ribbons, holding hands with children at summer camps. I looked around, not a single photo of me, despite the fact that I had designed the campaign content for the foundation's first 3 years. I was the one who gave the opening speech at their headquarters launch in front of dozens of donors, but it didn't matter anymore. I had learned to stop looking for myself in those pictures. The event began at 7 p.m. The string section played softly as guests murmured and found their seats. I chose the very last row, near the emergency exit. No one noticed. I was the shadow they were used to not seeing. When the stage lights swept across the room, my father stepped up to the podium. Dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, he looked every bit the statesman, voice steady, each word carefully chosen. "Tonight, we honor a journey, a legacy, a heart that has guided us not just with talent, but with tireless dedication. The Hayes family is proud to say, our one and only daughter, Grace Hayes, is the embodiment of that spirit." The words echoed across the ballroom. Then came the applause, polite and synchronized like everyone had been programmed to believe it was true. I didn't see Grace, but I knew she was there. She was always present in every picture my parents wanted the world to see. I didn't laugh, I didn't cry, I just sat still, hands in my lap, feeling the quiet thunder roll in my chest. They had chosen to erase me formally, in front of hundreds, under stage lights and public praise. But what they didn't know was that on this night, my silence had already taken a different form. Inside that red envelope were 3 things: a copy of my grandmother's original will, the only complete and legal version, naming me as sole heir to the Lake Champlain property, a forged transfer agreement with mismatched signatures, dates, and a notary stamp from Linda Hayes, and finally, an official complaint detailing fraud, asset misappropriation, a list of witnesses, and supporting evidence. All of it notarized and stamped with a tracking number registered at the law office of Cameron Blair, the same attorney they once hired and who now represented me. I didn't need anyone to speak on my behalf. I didn't need to grab a microphone or confront them in front of a crowd. The truth doesn't need theatrics. It just needs to be placed in the right spot at the right time. And that night, it was right there on the registration table, nestled between name badges and glossy invitations. As the event continued, I quietly stood and walked out, still invisible. But I knew they'd have to look soon. Not at me, but at the thing they thought they had buried for good. I woke up later than usual the next morning. My apartment was dim with gray light, rain tapping gently against the windowsill. The phone didn't ring, no email from Cameron. Everything was strangely quiet, like I had just stepped out of a dream that left my head aching. I brewed coffee and sat by the window. Before I could even take a sip, the phone started vibrating. The first message came from an old college friend with a link and no caption. The second arrived less than 2 minutes later, from a former colleague at the Arts Foundation. "Are you okay? I just saw this." The third, fourth, they came like a flood. I opened the first link. It led to a post on an independent investigative blog I used to follow when I worked in communications. The headline, bold and centered, read, "Voices from the Shadows. Leaked audio shakes the Hayes Foundation." I read it, heart pounding. The audio had been uploaded by an anonymous account, no source listed, just a line that said they tried to erase a daughter from their family's legacy. Hear them say it themselves. I hit play. My mother's voice, cold and precise. "Emily is talented, I won't deny that. But her image doesn't fit. The Hayes family can't have someone too sensitive, too outspoken representing us. We need consistency." Then my father. She used to read everything, but she doesn't have access anymore. We're in control. The clip ended with a soft laugh and the clink of glasses, like it was all part of a seamless plan, free of friction. I set the phone down, my hand still trembling, not from shock. I had heard that recording before. I was the one who saved it, but I hadn't expected it to be made public. Someone had acted before me, or alongside me. Maybe Cameron, maybe someone from that meeting years ago. Whoever it was, they had flung open the door I once stood knocking on alone. Within hours, the post was everywhere. On Twitter, the hashtag Hayes Erasure began to trend. A journalist from a financial magazine published a deep dive article, From Family Legacy to Image Manipulation, the Dark Side of the Hayes Brand. Former foundation employees began commenting anonymously, sharing how they were told not to include Emily's name in the meeting minutes or remove her photo from the About page. By late afternoon, 2 of the foundation's major donors had suspended their partnerships. A press conference was canceled at the last minute. The foundation's main website went down due to traffic spikes. I didn't seek out the news, but it found me anyway. Through texts, missed calls, and headlines scrolling across my neighbor's TV screen. Grace disappeared from social media. Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all wiped or made private. Photos from her new office, her team at Grace Hayes, Legacy Consulting, gone. I didn't know if it was self-preservation or retreat. I only knew silence was no longer a safe option. By evening, a source from the Vermont State Tax Office confirmed that the Hayes family was officially under review for asset filings from the past 5 years, including undeclared real estate transfers. An email from the state's Charity Oversight Division began circulating among press outlets, currently evaluating the possibility of temporarily suspending the Hayes Foundation's license pending financial transparency review. I sat in front of my laptop, not typing, not replying, just watching. Everything I was once told to keep quiet was now being spoken by them, heard by thousands. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt an enormous void opening where an old wound used to be. No one called to apologize. No one asked if I was okay. But no one could ever again say I was too sensitive, too much, or not the right fit. And even though I wasn't the one who hit upload, I knew better than anyone. Once the world sees the truth, it doesn't look away so easily. The family court in Burlington looked nothing like what you see in movies. It was small, with low ceilings and beige painted walls that had yellowed over time. No raised benches, no gavels, no dramatic spotlight. Just rows of cold wooden seats, the steady hum of an old air conditioning unit overhead, and the mixed scent of paperwork and carpet that hadn't been deep cleaned in years. I sat beside Cameron, one hand resting lightly on the thick stack of documents we'd spent weeks preparing. Across from us, my mother sat upright in a cream-colored dress, fingers laced tightly together. Next to her, my father bowed his head, rubbing his temple now and then like a headache was lurking beneath. Grace leaned to one side, still scrolling on her phone, even though the reception in the room was terrible. When the judge entered, the room rose and then settled back down. She was a woman in her 50s, compact frame, gray hair pulled into a tight bun, and a voice that was clear and precise. She scanned the room and simply said, "Let's begin." Cameron stood, opened the folder, and began presenting. He didn't use theatrical language, just went point by point, document by document, signature by signature. He began with the original will left by Elise Palmer, notarized and certified in April, 3 years before her passing. In it, I was named the sole heir to the lake house and granted authority to review all asset distributions from the family trust if irregularities were suspected. Next came the forged transfer contract with mismatched signatures, a comparison sheet from my rental documents, and a letter from the state notary office confirming Linda Hayes' seal had been misused. Then came the internal emails, the recordings, the inaccurate tax filings. The atmosphere in the room began to shift, from skeptical to heavy when the recording played, my mother's voice saying I should be removed from the brand image. The entire courtroom froze. That sound, played within the narrow space of the court, wasn't a family matter anymore. It was testimony, clear, irrefutable. Grace lowered her head. Her fingers trembled slightly, her thumb no longer moving across the screen. My father turned his face toward the wall, silent. My mother remained in position, but her face had gone pale gray. Her eyes had lost that usual calculating edge. There was only a hollow coldness. When the judge asked, "Does the respondent have a comment regarding this will?" my mother stood. Her voice didn't shake, but the uncertainty in it was unmistakable. We believed we were acting in accordance with my mother's wishes, she said. Perhaps there was an administrative error, a filing mistake. Cameron only tilted his head, no rebuttal, no smirk. The judge looked down at the folder, then back at me. "Miss Hayes, would you like to say anything?" I stood. I didn't look at any of the three people across from me. I only looked at the judge. My voice was steady, almost tired. "I didn't destroy this family," I said. "They did that a long time ago. I just kept the record." No one replied, no one interrupted. The silence that followed blanketed the courtroom, pulling everyone into the truth they had tried so hard to avoid. The judge nodded. "The court recognizes the will as legally valid. Ownership of the Lake Champlain property is granted to Miss Emily Hayes. All related transactions are declared null and void. The court also authorizes a full audit of the Elise Palmer Trust." I sat down and didn't look at the other side again. Cameron closed the file, placed a hand on my shoulder. Nothing more needed to be said. We had done what we came to do. Across the aisle, Grace buried her face in her hands. She wasn't sobbing, but her shoulders shook quietly. My mother stayed standing, eyes fixed forward, desperately trying to keep her balance, though she was no longer in control. She had always been a master of choreography, of speeches, of parties, of camera angles. But today, nothing remained inside the frame she'd spent years designing. No spotlight could save that expression from the truth just read into record. I returned to the lake house on an early fall morning when mist still floated over the water and the maple trees had just started shedding their leaves. The house stood quietly in the landscape, like it had never been denied, like it had been waiting for me to return without a single question. The wooden door creaked at the hinges when I pushed it open. Inside still carried the scent of damp pine and a faint trace of chamomile tea, just like the kind my grandmother used to brew each night. Stood in the old kitchen, ran my hand over the scratched stone countertop, and reached for the third drawer on the right, where she used to hide mint candies for me when I was little. No one knew I was back. No reporters, no lawyers, no family. Just me and the one place in my life that had never required me to fit in, to belong. It took nearly 4 months before I started renovations. Quietly. No signs. I hired a small crew from a nearby town who worked at the pace of this place. Slow, careful, and without fanfare. We kept the original structure, just updated the wiring, opened up the living room into a shared space, and turned the 2 upstairs bedrooms into writing studios. The wood-paneled walls were polished, whiteboards and bookshelves installed, and a single photograph was hung. My grandmother at her wooden desk, editing a manuscript with red pen. I had taken that photo during my final year of college. Back then, I thought I was just preserving a moment. Now, it had become the compass for everything this house stood for. I named the center Hollow Birch House, the name my grandmother once used in her journals to refer to this home. Then I began sending out emails to youth organizations that supported teens from the foster care system. I didn't promote it publicly. No press releases, no articles. I just wrote a short message. If you've ever felt unseen, this place is for you. 3 weeks later, I received the first response. A girl named Mia, 19 years old, had just aged out of foster care and didn't know where to go next. She wrote that she often wrote late at night, but never dared call herself a writer. I read her email while making tea, my hands trembling at her final sentence. All I need is a room and someone who believes I can matter. I invited her to come. Then another girl, then 2 friends applied together. Within 2 months, Hollow Birch House welcomed 5 residents, ages ranging from 17 to 24. They came from different states. Some arrived with only a backpack, others with manuscripts no one had ever read. I didn't ask too many questions. I simply showed them their rooms, explained how the shared space worked, and left a blank notebook on each desk. I allocated part of the inheritance fund, transferred it under a new scholarship foundation named the Ruth Palmer Literacy Fund, my grandmother's full name, the woman who quietly taught me how to write in silent afternoons no one else in the family noticed. No announcements, no speeches, just a quiet email sent to those who needed to know. A separate bank account, never linked to the Hayes name. I didn't need anyone in my family to know what I was doing with the assets they once tried to take. I didn't need them to understand. I just needed my grandmother, wherever she was, to know that her name still meant something. Not in cold granite at a cemetery, but in words alive on the page, written by girls who once believed their voices didn't matter. Each morning, I made coffee for the house and opened the windows to the lake. The girls sat at a long wooden table in the common room, headphones on, fingers moving steadily across their keyboards. Some still wrote by hand, quietly patching together memories they were just learning how to name. Sometimes they left notes on the kitchen counter. I finished the first chapter last night. Thanks for letting me be quiet and still feel heard. I never thought I could tell my own story. I kept every one of those notes in an old tea tin that once belonged to my grandmother. Every time I opened it, I saw not just words, but evidence, living, breathing proof that no one is born to only listen to someone else's story. I don't talk much about this place to anyone beyond these walls. I didn't put my name on the door. I didn't sign any letters. But something inside me has started to lighten. Like stones that once weighed down my chest since childhood were finally being lifted one by the hands of people who had no connection to the Hayes name. That day the sun was soft, the air was fresh after a night of rain, the scent of damp earth and peeling bark drifting gently through the breeze onto the front porch. I sat in the old wooden chair my grandmother once placed there, a warm cup of tea in my hands, watching the girls gathered under the maple trees by the lake, reading their new writing out loud to each other. They took turns, sometimes bursting into laughter at a funny detail, other times sitting in deep silence after a passage that stirred something raw in the writer's voice. Amid the murmurs, a young girl, maybe 16, timidly walked toward me. Her name was Lainey. She'd only been at the center for 2 weeks. Since arriving, she had barely spoken to anyone, always sitting quietly at the writing desk near the second-floor window or wandering the garden with headphones on in the early mornings. Lainey stepped closer, holding something wrapped in a piece of tissue. I set my teacup down and smiled, waiting for her to speak. She hesitated, then gently extended her hand and whispered, "This is for you." I slowly unwrapped the tissue. Inside was a handmade paper badge, cut into a circle with scissors, the edges lined with pale blue ribbon. In the center, scribbled in black marker, it read, "For the first person who made me feel like I mattered." I stared at it for a long moment, then looked up. Lainey didn't drop her gaze. She was looking right at me, wide-eyed and searching, like she was waiting for something. An acknowledgement, a reflection, or maybe just her own presence mirrored back. I reached for my collar and pinned the paper badge right where, years ago, I used to wear the Hayes family crest, a small gold shield handed out during a traditional ceremony when I was 13. My mother had said then, "Just wear it to look nice. Don't think too much." But this badge wasn't cold. It was soft, a little crooked, still tacky from the glue, and curling slightly at one corner. Yet when I pressed it to the fabric of my coat, my chest ached in the strangest way. As if something I never believed I deserved was now resting quietly over my heart, needing no one's permission. "Thank you," I said softly. "It's beautiful." Lainey pressed her lips together, gave a quick nod, then walked back to the group beneath the tree. No one asked her what she had given me. No one noticed that I remained seated long after, one hand gently resting on the badge, afraid it might fall off. I looked out over the lake, where sunlight shimmered like silver coins tossed across the surface. I used to think that without my family's approval, I would always be on the outside. But I've come to learn there's something stronger than recognition. It's being seen without having to perform, to fit, or to bow. I don't need to be accepted again. I don't need to return to the dinner table where my chair once sat empty. I have another world now, not bigger, not brighter, but truly mine. And in that world, I don't wear anyone else's badge. I'm called by my name, in a voice that's real, not filtered through politeness or confined to the edges of a carefully cropped family photo. That little paper badge, from a child who knew nothing of my past, was the first thing in years that made me feel like I had a place that couldn't be erased. Not because I had reclaimed something, but because I finally stopped erasing myself from my own story. I don't know what this story brings up for you. Maybe you were the one whose name got left out, or maybe you've had to sit still to keep the peace while breaking inside. But if something in my story made you pause, made you remember a piece of yourself, share it. I read every message. Because maybe that's how you'll finally be heard, finally be named, exactly as you are. And if you want to hear more stories about family, the ones never told, the quiet shadows, and the small moments that help us reclaim who we are, follow this channel. I'll still be here, telling the next chapter for the ones who were forgotten.